this was the perfect opportunity for Minnesota to kind of like walk back the fact that they fucking drafted her, leave her unprotected, let no one pick her up, and like let her feel that sting. Like, yeah, she's a talented player on the ice, but she's a fucking terrible person. It's fucking Pride Month. Don't reward her. Are you kidding? Hello, and welcome back to Sarah Says So, your go-to show for women's sports news. Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you're excited for a great show today. We've got a lot to go over. There's been a lot going on in the women's sports world as a whole lately, so there's definitely a lot to talk about this afternoon. But of course, before we get started, make sure you're following us on all socials. So it's at Sarah Says So ETB on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and then anywhere you get your podcasts. And then all of the episodes also come out on the ETB Network YouTube channel, so make sure you don't miss that either. But in terms of what we're going to be going over today, we're going to talk about PWHL expansion and all the player protection lists. Even when I was prepping the episode, as someone who knows a good amount about the league and what's going on, I was kind of confused with what information was available online. So hopefully I can explain it in a way that's pretty clear. And then we'll talk a lot about the Athletes Unlimited Softball League as well. And then we'll cap it off with some WNBA news, specifically from the Sky Wings game last Thursday. So we've got a lot to go over, but I'm super excited for this episode because I spent a pretty decent amount of time prepping it. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. But starting off with talking about PWHL expansion. So just a reminder that exclusive signing window started June 4th. So that was Wednesday. I'm recording it today, so it started this morning. I haven't seen any signings yet today, at least by the time I'm recording this, but that all could change like at the drop of a hat, I guess. So I've just been pretty glued to Twitter and other, just like any source of PWHL news that I follow to see. But that'll wrap up on the 8th at 5 p.m. Eastern. So during this time, the new teams from Seattle and Vancouver can sign a maximum of 5 players each, but there's no minimum. So like in theory, like neither of them could sign anyone. But I'd be kind of surprised if that happened. But any unprotected player or any player on an expiring contract is eligible to be signed. And we've like gone over the different things about eligibility. There's a couple intricacies in earlier episodes if you have questions about that, just because I'm not going to keep going over it and boring everyone. So make sure you go back and listen to those if you have questions. I think it was episode 1. But the next day, right after the signing window closes, is the expansion draft. So that's June 9th. Both teams will select a minimum of 7 players each until they hit 12. So in theory, like I said before, like they don't have to sign anyone during this exclusive signing window. They could technically both sign no one, and then they would pick all the way until they hit 12 during the draft, which would be really interesting. But either way, that's still like a lot of draft, like rounds of the draft. I mean, it's just the 2 teams, but picking 7 people each, like that's still hopefully gonna be pretty exciting. But if like one team comes in, so like I said before, like if neither of them sign anyone during this window, then they'll each draft 12 players. But like say for example, Seattle signs 4 players and Vancouver signs just 1, then Vancouver would get those like 3 extra like picks to make the teams like even in terms of numbers. Some players are only available to be like selected in this whole expansion situation during the exclusive signing window, so during that June 4th to 8th period. But other players are eligible during the signing window and the draft. And the players that are eligible for the signing during the signing window and the draft are eligible to be that 4th protected pick. So once both Seattle and Vancouver have 2 players, or once each inaugural team from the inaugural 6 has lost 2 players, they can pick a 4th player to add to their already 3 protected players that can't be taken by the new teams. So it's a little bit weird, but I'm going to kind of go over what the status is of each team, who their 3 protected players are, and then I also made, this is an episode that if you're just listening to it as a podcast, I would, and you have like the time, I would honestly recommend throwing on the YouTube, because I'm going to put up graphics with like the details for eligible players for each team in terms of like what type of eligibility they have, just because when I was going through it online, like on the normal PWHL website, and I was just using the access that any fan would have, like I found it kind of confusing the way that they laid it out. So if you're a visual person, I would definitely recommend throwing the episode up on YouTube. But we're going to start with Boston. So Boston protected Erin Frankel, Alina Mueller, and Megan Keller. There are a lot of people with a lot of thoughts about this one. I'm absolutely thrilled. I actually was talking to, I was going to say my friend, it was fully my mom, like before the protection lists were due. And there had been a bunch of rumors about Hilary Knight not being one of the protected people that they were going to select. And I literally said, I was like, well, you're crazy if you give up Erin Frankel. That's just dumb. I had a very good feeling that they were going to pick Alina. And then I just kind of was like, I feel like they would go defensively. I feel like they would try to round it out. And just like, even before I thought that, like in terms of the people that stood out as potential people that they, like I would think that they would protect, it was immediately Megan Keller and Susanna Topney, and they ended up picking Keller. So I think that makes a lot of sense. A lot of people are mad because like they kind of hung the captain out to dry. Like Knight is the captain, and I get that. But again, she did, which we talked about, I think, last week or the week before, she just announced that the 2026 Olympics are going to be her last Olympics. And so I think that Boston's thinking from a longevity standpoint in terms of if those are her last Olympics, like she said that she's not leaving the PWHL anytime soon, but like who knows how realistic that really is. Like a lot could happen between now and then. I mean, there's a lot of like time in between now and there where like things could unfold. I'm not entirely sure, but it makes sense to me that Boston would opt to protect someone like Alina, who's just on the younger side, but has so much skill and so much experience. Like if you're thinking about who to pick from a forward standpoint, and those are kind of like the 2 options, I feel like there's no question, especially if you're thinking about how young this league is, how young each program is. It makes sense, even though Knight is currently their captain, for Boston to invest in the younger talent and in a player who I think should be their next captain. I just really like Alina also. She's awesome. Not to throw my bias in all the time, but it's my show, so I can. But in terms of who the options are on the fleet, I'm going to toss up this graphic on, if you're like watching this, obviously you can like see it, but there's 2 columns. So there's the players that are available only during the exclusive signing window, and then players that are available during the signing window, draft, and also eligible for that 4th protection selection. So Boston has a good amount of players. Overall, they have 25 that are eligible and like kind of up for grabs, so to speak. There are 14 eligible only during the signing window, and then 11 that are eligible the full time and available for protection. So I'm not gonna like sit and read all 20 plus names for all of these teams, just because that's not great use of this microphone, and I'm not gonna do that to people. But if you're curious about the list and you're not like watching this, all the lists are on the PWHL website. You can like literally Google just PWHL like player protection lists, and they put out a big release, and it's the protection lists. And then if you scroll past that, there are the categories of eligibility for all 6 teams. So obviously there's a lot to pick from here in terms of people that I think or like players that I think would be strong options for Seattle or Vancouver. I think Hilary Knight is like an obvious choice. Her experience and her skill level, like even though there is now this question of longevity. It's really just like I think if I don't see a world basically in which Hilary Knight isn't taken quickly by one of these two new teams, just because having her experience and leadership has been so crucial for Boston. She could help if another franchise get off the ground, regardless of how much longer she plans to stay in the league. I also think it could be really interesting to see her specifically in Seattle because of the connection with the new Seattle GM who spent the last 2 seasons working in the Fleet front office. I think that could be kind of, I mean, I don't even know if they like know each other or work together closely or anything, but like I think that kind of connection and continuing to kind of help build this league and build things from the ground up could be a really interesting experience. And I think Knight is a really integral helpful part to that growth. And then, so she's one of the players that falls into the category of being eligible for the expansion draft and signing window. So in theory, if she's not one of the first 2 players selected by Boston could protect her as their 4th player. I'd be like surprised if that happened, but that would be interesting. Other players in that category of eligible during both the draft and the signing window, defenseman Daniela Pesova and forward Hannah Bilka, I think both of them could be really good options. They're both pretty impactful on the ice, and just in terms of like thinking about building teams from scratch, and thinking about all the parts you're gonna have. I think like for each of the teams, I tried to pull out like at least one player in every position if like that was an option. Just because these 2 new teams do really have to be thinking about that. And on that similar note, I would say goaltender Emma Soderberg from Boston. She's a signing window only player, as is, I mentioned earlier, Susanna Topany. She's a forward, but Soderberg as a goaltender, she struggled first in the first season, but then this season she was really, really good, especially when Frankel got hurt. And so I think, especially if we're thinking about like investing for the future, she's pretty young and like talent that you can like really, really work with, and just kind of that hunger and desire to get better. I think that because there aren't a ton of goaltender options necessarily, and I mean in terms of ones that are available, I think that Soderberg is a good choice in terms of I think I could see her being like first string with like a little bit more work, but I also think just in terms of like an investment player that she would be a really good option. So yeah, that's kind of the whole Fleet rundown. So again, their 3 protected players are Frankel, Keller, and Mueller. I'm really interested to see what kind of happens with this specifically. Again, Boston is my team. I love them. It sucks to like lose any of your players from any franchise, but I am like really curious to see where and when Hilary Knight moves on. I think that'll be interesting and like potentially telling, depending on like how teams are trying to like build around the players that they're taking, in the sense of like, I know when Boston was building their team, they were building around Erin Frankel and building around getting that goaltender because they signed her. So then they were like thinking about building around that. And once they like kind of checked that box, they were like, okay, now we can go focus on XYZ position. Okay, quick like little interlude here because I actually had to stop recording and restart because my headphones died, but we don't need to talk about that. While I was waiting for them to charge, I like ran down to pick up a package from my building. I couldn't end up getting it because they're really busy with not the point. I'm wearing one of the like new Play Society like merch drops for like the Sky sweatshirt from it. And there was this like DoorDash driver in the elevator with me. And he was asking me all these questions about the sweatshirt and like where I got it and like why it was a Sky fit. And it just like absolutely cracked me up. No one's ever that like chatty in the elevator, but he was like really locked into the sweatshirt. And then he was like, I was gonna ask you if you played, and I was like, for reference, I'm 5'5". I do not look like a WNBA player. I mean, I'll take it where I can get it, but I was like, what? Okay. Anyway, going back to PWHL stuff, we're going to talk about Minnesota Frost. So their protection selections made a lot of sense to me, honestly. They decided to protect Kendall Coyne-Schofield, Taylor Heisey, and Lee Stickline. They did protect a goaltender, which I thought was pretty interesting. I think there were only 2 teams that didn't protect a goalie. But that honestly leaves some pretty strong options in terms of goaltending for Seattle and Vancouver. And I mean, overall, the most recent champions can only pick 3 people. They had a pretty solid team. There are some pretty good selections to be made from this group in particular. So, looking at the eligible players from the Frost specifically, in terms of strong selection options for Seattle and Vancouver, I would say either goaltender, Maddie Rooney or Nicole Hensley. Rooney's a signing window only player, so that's a little bit different, but either one of them I think would be a great option, just in terms of they both are really strong goaltenders, and to not protect either of them, especially when you think about the fact that all of all the Walter Cup games went to overtime and stuff. So much of that was goaltending. That's partially, I'm sure, why Ottawa ended up protecting Gwen Phillips. But I would say either one of them would be a good choice. I would say I'd probably pick Nicole Hensley over Maddie Rooney. But in terms of non-goaltending, the other notable players I wanted to point out are all expansion draft and signing window players that are eligible for that 4th protection. So defender Sophie Jakes, forward Katie Knoll, Grace Sumwinkle, who's also a forward. Any of them, they're all pretty young. They're all they all produce very, very well. I don't think you could really go wrong with any of them. In terms of high point producing, that's unprotected on the Frost. You could pick up Britta Curl. I would advise against it. We discussed this last week. I would be pretty surprised, honestly, if either of the new franchises took her, though, in terms of, I mean, it all depends on whether or not they care about the fan response, but fan response to Curl in general in the league haven't been super great. And I don't think it would be the smartest idea for a brand new franchise to immediately step into that whole mess necessarily. There are so many other good players that are unprotected that I just don't think it would necessarily benefit either team to take Britta Curl with the issues that come with her, so to speak. But yeah, that is kind of where things are at for the Frost. Next, we're going to talk about Montreal. And so the Victoire have protected, of course, Marie-Philippe, Laura Stacey, and then Anne Renee, I can never say her last name, Davian, hopefully, I think. I don't know. I always mess that one up. I'm so sorry to her. Shout out to you, Queen. But I was really, small, completely, non-sports related part of me was so glad that they protected both Poulet and Stacey, just because they're married, and I would be so sad if they got split up. It's so fun that they're together. I love there's the one specific shot of them on the ice after one of them scored the goal. That's always used with the "She's Gay" Marcus Twitter meme, and I adore them. I think they're so awesome. But yeah, so those were the protections that Montreal went with. They didn't end up protecting any defenders, which I think is pretty interesting, especially considering the defenders that they do have, already on their roster. In terms of the players that are available to be poached, so to speak, from Montreal, there's a lot. They have 14 eligible only during that exclusive signing window, and then 11 eligible during both the signing window and the draft. And then those 11 are also eligible for the protection thing. So that's 25, same as Boston, more than Frost. But there's a lot of good selection here. I think specifically in terms of defense, both Erin Ambrose and Kayla Barnes are really, really good. they're both really strong, just in terms of what they do on the ice. And I think really either of them would be a good selection in terms of just trying to like build out that roster and build like a deep roster. There aren't a ton of defenders available that are like, I mean, when you're building your team, you're trying to get the best of the best. And like, I would like some teams opted to protect their top defenders, which like obviously makes sense. But so I think both of these two being unprotected, Ambrose and Barnes, I think that provides a really interesting opportunity for both Vancouver and Seattle. And then on the forward side, I would also say Abby Breen and Jennifer Gardenier. They're both two of the highest points producers for the team this season. And so just in terms of like when you're thinking about like what you need on the ice, like you need to score goals. And so getting those players that are able to produce not only those goals, but those assists as well is definitely something that both Seattle and Vancouver are going to be considering, obviously. Some of that like feels like redundant to say, but I think like spelling it out like can be helpful at times in terms of like all the options really truly are so like versatile with each team in terms of like who they opted to protect and everything. And so I think kind of going into the weeds like this just can be a little bit interesting. They also have their two goaltenders are available during the exclusive signing window, but neither of them like necessarily stood out to me as like goaltenders I would point out that I would like want to scoop up if I was making the decisions. So that's always like an interesting thing to think about as well. Just in terms of like kind of who's around and who's available. They obviously like went and protected their top one, but the other two are just kind of dangling out there for now if the team decides to take them. So that's kind of where Montreal is at. We'll talk next about New York. So the Sirens protected forward Sarah Barber, which I talked about her a little bit last week. I said on the very, very off chance that she was not protected, I thought it would be cool if she ended up in Vancouver, where the former Princeton head coach is now the GM, and she is a Princeton alum. I thought that would have been cool, but I did not think that was going to happen. So Sarah Barber, their captain, defenseman Micah Zandy Hart, and then Ella Shelton as well. Honestly, I was kind of surprised by some of these selections on the part of the Sirens. They left all their goaltenders unprotected, and like they left a lot of their high points producers unprotected. Just in terms of like, it was, I don't know. Ella Shelton surprised me. Like the one thing I always think about when I see Ella Shelton's name is like, oh, she scored the first ever goal in the league in the first game ever. But like, I don't like have a solid recollection of her like necessarily doing a lot like this last season. And I guess I'm surprised that they're leaving players like Alex Carpenter and Jesse Eldridge, who are really high point producers for them, unprotected. But I mean, they could be thinking specifically about defense. I don't know. This was one of the ones I think that I don't know. The ones that surprised me the most, I think probably this one just made me pause, but then Toronto, which we'll get to later, was kind of the only one where I stopped and like really like kind of not looked at all the options, but there are so many like names that like I immediately thought of when I read the three names that were selected to be like under the protection thing. So in terms of who's like available for New York, the eligible players, they don't have like a ton. They only really have 23. So there's 9 eligible during that exclusive window only, and then 14 eligible during both the signing window and the draft. In terms of like strong selection options for the new teams, I think Alex Carpenter and Jesse Eldridge, I mentioned before, they're both forwards. Also forward, Abby Ruck. And then goaltender Corinne Schroeder. All 4 of them, I think, would be really great selections. They're all pretty reliable players. In terms of the signing window only, there wasn't anyone specifically that stuck out to me like enough to point them out as like strong options, just in the sense I'm trying to stick around like 4 or 5 since they're only taking like 2 at first. But in terms of those signing window only players, both Chloe Gerard and Brooke Hobson are former Northeastern players, and just from like what I know about them and their like playing style, I think they could both be strong selections in the sense that like they're both really good team players and they both have a lot of experience at multiple levels, like multiple levels of the sport, nationally and internationally. And so like people that might not necessarily like stand out too immediately on a stat line in the sense that they're not like top 5 in points on the team, but still really strong players nonetheless. And then we have 2 more teams. I know this can get like a little bit tedious depending on how much of like a roster fan you are. I think it's really fun to like go into the weeds and stuff like this. I hate like using that phrase twice, and I didn't mean to do that, but whatever. But yeah, so that was New York. We'll go next to the Charge. I gave like a little tease about this earlier when I was talking about the goaltenders, but the Charge opted to protect forward Emily Clark, goaltender Gwyneth Phillips, and then defenseman Ronia Salvalainen. Again, 50-50 on that name. But I think these were also some really interesting selections. Ottawa was the only other team besides Boston that opted to leave their captain unprotected. So their captain is forward Brianne Jenner. I think it would be surprising if both Seattle and Vancouver took a captain and kept them a captain, in the sense of like, I don't think either team necessarily wants to have someone that like has already filled that role on a PWHL team, in the sense of like they're trying to like build like new identities for those teams. I mean, that's just like my speculation. I could be totally off the mark on that. I think it would be more likely that Hilary would be named a captain. Like if you're talking about not naming one versus the other, I feel like it'd be more likely that Hilary would be named a captain. But I think having both of those players be available does provide a really great opportunity to get really strong leaders up into those new franchises, regardless of whether or not they're wearing that C, but also players that have a good amount of experience. I mean, I've talked about Knight a bunch, but they both have a strong amount of experience, and I think that's something, especially in a league that's so young, with like teams that'll be so young, that experience will be incredibly important. But in terms of who the Charge have left unprotected, we have quite a few. So they have 24 total players that are eligible. In terms of strong options, I would say on the signing window only side, 2 forwards, Cheyenne Darkangelo and then Teresa Vanasova. Both of them are really, really good. And I was honestly pretty surprised that Vanasova specifically was unprotected, just because she is a really high points producer for the team. But yeah, both of them are only available during that signing window only period. So if those 2 are players that Seattle and Vancouver would want, then they're going to have to be scooped up pretty quickly. In terms of players that are available also during the expansion draft, I would say Gabby Hughes, Brianne Jenner, who we talked about before, and then Jocelyn LaRoque. Both Hughes and LaRoque are both really strong players that are always kind of around it. Like when you're watching the game, your eyes are always kind of drawn to them, but they're also always around in like the stat lines and things like that. So again, just in terms of thinking about players who can have an impact, like in all aspects of the game, I think there are some really great options in Ottawa for sure. It's hard because there are just so many. It's such almost like an unprecedented situation in which like there are so many people to pick from that I can't imagine like actually having to make the decision, because I feel like I'm just like throwing darts at a board and hoping something sticks in terms of like what I think teams will do. But like I can't imagine actually being paid to make the decisions. That would be crazy. So last but not least, we have Toronto. So This is the one that I said earlier surprised me the most, just in terms of who they protected versus who they didn't. I think there was also a pretty strong reaction like on social media to who they didn't protect. A lot of people were really upset that they didn't protect Sarah Nurse, which I was also pretty surprised that they didn't protect Sarah Nurse. I think their selections make sense in terms of who they did pick. They opted to pick Renata Fast, Blair Turnbull, and Daryl Watts. I think Watts is a smart pick because she really turned it on in playoffs specifically. But I read somewhere, I can't remember specifically where it was, but that the deal that like Toronto, like her contract deal or something, is like kind of a steal for the team. And so I think like in that aspect, that's another really interesting protection. But both Fast and Turnbull are excellent players. I think those protections make a ton of sense. But I don't know. Toronto I find interesting in terms of the fact that they out of their top 5 point leaders, they only protected 2. And then everyone's really upset about Sarah Nurse not being protected, but she's actually 5th in their point leaders. And so forwards like Hannah Miller and Jessie Comper, I'm surprised that they're just kind of out there hanging around. They're all 3 of them, Comper, Miller, and Nurse, are signing window only players, and so is fellow forward Natalie Spooner. They're all really strong selections that I think would be really instrumental to whatever team could grab them up. In terms of the expansion draft signing window, like players that are only eligible during both of those times, forward Emma Malte and then defenseman Megan Carter, I would say both of them. They're both young players. They both had their first year in the league this past year. And I think if you're thinking about longevity in the future, they could definitely be players to kind of build around. I just realized if you're watching on the YouTube that the eligible players list had not been up. But in terms of who they have overall that are players that are eligible, there are 24. So kind of in the middle in terms of, we have, I think 25 is the highest right now, or out of all the teams in terms of the most players that are available. But that's just kind of how it happens, I guess, in terms of like contracts and like the other facets of eligibility. But again, I think like what team was it? I think it was Ottawa. We just talked about Comber, Miller, Nurse, and Spooner. They're all signing window only players, and so these 2 teams really have until the 5 Eastern on June 8th to make these decisions. And if they don't end up citing any of those players that fall into that category, then those players are really just done for. And so I think that's really interesting in the sense of like, you really have to act quick, but also there's so much like negotiation that goes into everything. Like I would just kill to be on a fly on the wall during some of those conversations. I just think stuff like this is so interesting. But yeah, that's kind of where everything stands for now in terms of the protection lists and who's eligible, who's not. If you didn't see a name on those lists, if you're watching on YouTube, then that player isn't eligible. And there wasn't really anyone crazy that I felt like I didn't like. There weren't necessarily any players that while I was prepping this, I was like, oh, where is that name? That like made me want to go look at the like contract eligibility list or anything like that. So hopefully that was kind of a nice, like helpful little overview. I found the list, like I said, on the PWHL website to be kind of confusing just in terms of how they were laid out. But I know that was kind of a long section. So next, we're going to talk about the Athletes Unlimited Softball League and then a little bit of WNBA news. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our friends at Playback. Presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about, win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And now back to the show. Okay, so we were about to just transition over to some AUSL stuff, but while I was recording this episode, there have been some movements in the PWHL. Some that I'm not necessarily, I'm fine with the movements. I'm not thrilled with what followed. So basically, just while I was recording, Minnesota lost Sophie Jakes to Vancouver and Claire Thompson also to Vancouver, both according to Ian Kennedy. And the rumor from Ian, I'm just reading this off of Twitter, but the rumor from Ian about, I can't even tell what this was. He said not 100% confirmed, but it does sound like the Minnesota Frost have used their force protection on Britta Kursalem following the signings of Claire Thompson and Sophie Jakes. Listen, I get it. She scored so many goals for them, but like, oh my god, like, wow. This was the perfect opportunity for Minnesota to kind of like walk back the fact that they fucking drafted her, leave her unprotected, let no one pick her up, and like let her feel that sting. Like, yeah, she's a talented player on the ice, but she's a fucking terrible person. It's fucking Pride Month. Don't reward her. Are you kidding? Anyway, I saw that and I was like, this has to be a fucking joke. Like, it's not, and like I get it, and like that's the business of sports, whatever. But like for a league that's like so like entwined with pride and like it, like, not to be that bitch, but like it's Pride Month, like don't fucking do that. Like, I don't know, just doesn't sit right with me. I've already like compared it to like the Sedona Prince situation in the WNBA, but like I think this was a time where Curl should have been hung out to dry and kind of like, I mean, it wouldn't have done anything because she still would have been on the Frost roster, but like, I think that actions like speak a lot. I think that continuing to like have her in the league and like not address like her behavior and her statements is like crazy. I just, it's like one of those, like, I don't think we should be giving a platform to that person. I don't think, like, as good as she is, like, I don't think we should be rewarding like blatant transphobia and homophobia by continuing to like place her at such a high value in the league. I get that she's a good player, but she's a shitty person. That's kind of where I'm at with that one. But yeah, obviously, like, things are going to continue to develop. I recorded this on Wednesday, like, half in the afternoon. So any, like, PWHL news after that in terms of signings, well, like, obviously wasn't included before this. But if, like, at any point you're, like, listening and you're like, oh, like, that person's gone, like, yeah, time passes and I recorded this on Wednesday. So unfortunately, that is the situation. But in terms of kind of transitioning away from PWHL, now that I've spent so much time talking about it, never apologizing for it though, we have a very, very, very new, exciting women's league starting up on June 7th. And so that's going to be tomorrow, if you're listening, Saturday. That's their opening day, and it's the first women's professional softball league. I'm super, super excited for it. I grew up playing softball. I played for a really freaking long time, and I think this is so, like, overdue. I remember when Monet Davis pitching in the Little League World Series was, like, a huge deal because she was a girl, and, like, the conversation then that, like, there needed to be some sort of like league, professional league for women. Like obviously softball and baseball are different. And like they're like I still like I'm also like really excited for the professional baseball league, but I think like any progress in this sense is great progress, and so I'm really excited for opening day. There are going to be 2 games that day. The Bandits will face the Talons in Rosemont, Illinois at 2 Central. I'm like actually really close to there, so I might try and go. That is the goal. TBD on whether or not that will happen. I'll definitely have an update for you next week. But then later that night, the Blaze host the Bolts in Wichita, Kansas at 6:30 Central. And I'll talk about it in like a little bit when I get to the MLB stuff, but there are like ways to watch those opening day games, which is really awesome. The way that the league is going to work is basically for 2025, it's going to be a touring league featuring games in specific cities. So some of them are like I've never heard of Sulphur, Louisiana. And like Rosemont, Illinois is also like really random. It's right next to O'Hare though, so I guess like in terms of travel, it's really helpful. But the league is going to tour in a bunch of different cities, and they have 4 teams. I'm not entirely sure like what it would look like in terms of like expansion moving forward, but all of the teams are just like single mascot names. Like they're not tied to a city or anything, which is really interesting. And so it definitely gives them like a lot of opportunity to kind of like really bring the league around as many places as possible, because it's not like limited to like you can only go to games if you like live here or are near the stadium XYZ. So some of the cities that they're going to go to: Rosemont, like I said, Wichita, Sulphur, Louisiana, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Norman, Oklahoma, Omaha, Nebraska, Seattle, Washington, Salt Lake City, Utah, Round Rock, Texas, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So if you're going to be anywhere near any of those places, they're mostly like in the South. Like over the summer, a lot of people are like driving around out there. I don't know. I don't like take road trips. I also don't really go to the South. But yeah, check the calendar. See if any of the games that are close to you are games that you would want to and can go to. Like I've texted so many people about this game on Saturday, like trying to get people to go, because like not like if you build it, they'll come. Like people need to come. Like I like watching the PWHL develop and seeing how many people came to that. Like I just hope that like the AUSL and other like new women's leagues can have like a taste of that as well. In terms of teams for the AUSL, they have the Bolts, the Talons, the Bandits, and the Blaze. That's, I can't lie, like when you go to their website, that's pretty much like, there's not really like an about section for the teams. They all have great logos and great colors, but there's not a ton yet to necessarily differentiate them from each other. But what I'm most excited about is that the commissioner of this league is Kim Ng, who joined Athletes Unlimited last summer as a senior advisor to kind of help develop the league overall. But before that, she was the GM of the Miami Marlins, the MLB, and she was actually the first female GM in the league. I have looked up to her just as a trailblazing woman in sports for such a long time, and I remember like when I got this notification on my phone that she was named commissioner, I was so excited. Like I think I sent it to like 3 people right away. I was like, oh my God, this is so awesome. And she has so much genuine passion for not only baseball, but softball specifically, because she played at the University of Chicago, and she's always said she's very open about how passionate she is about sports and about baseball specifically, but she's said on the record like softball is her first love. And so I'm really excited to see kind of how she leads the league and what she does in this new role. I think she's probably the best person to take on the job. And it's like, I think it's always refreshing to have someone in a front office commissioner role that actually like knows what the hell they're doing and has experience on like the player athlete field side of things. So I think the league is like in really good hands with her. And the MLB also thinks that. So they announced just a few days ago that they're partnering with the AUSL. It's part of their ongoing commitment to supporting the growth of softball at all levels, according to their little press release. But they're going to help the league raise the visibility of the league itself and also the athletes through marketing, events, distribution, editorial, digital and social platforms, content, and more. The press release was actually really interesting. Some of the games will be airing on MLB Network and MLB.com, but that full schedule will be announced next week. The opening day games tomorrow, this Saturday, like I said, there's that afternoon game at 2 in Illinois, but the Kansas game that's at 6:30 Central, that's going to be exclusively on MLB Network. So no matter where you, like, if you have MLB Network, no matter where you are, you can totally tune in to one of the first ever games of the league, which I think is really, really cool. But yeah, I think that this partnership overall, like, we're seeing it a little bit in the PWHL, like with the Kraken signing on to help Seattle. But I think like one of the best things that the existing male professional sports leagues can do is like sign on to collaborate with these new female leagues and kind of show them the ropes in terms of like what behind the scenes stuff you might not think about, like preparing facilities and like all of the different bits and pieces that go into really creating a sports franchise. And I'm really pleased to see the MLB doing this. Baseball was like the first sport that I really became like a true fan of. And as I've gotten older, I haven't been necessarily thrilled with some of like the MLB decisions at large. But this is like something I'm really, really pleased to see. And I honestly was like a little bit surprised to see it. But I think it's really good. Obviously, like, I don't know. I don't want to give Rob Manfred a lot of credit, but he did say a lot of nice things about how much confidence the league had specifically in Kimming. I just like don't like him. I'm also projecting my anger for sure right now because most of the MLB, including the Cubs, haven't changed their social media profiles to like the Pride Rainbow versions. And that's just like making me sad. Specifically from the Cubs. Like the Cubs I don't expect because their owners love Donald Trump, but like it's a fucking picture. Put it up. Change your profile. Anyway, sorry. I also pulled a quote from Kimming like on this MLB partnership just because I thought I like, as much as it's not like it'd be great if it was a soundbite, but like as much as it is just like me reading her words, like I think what she had to say was like very powerful, especially when like as much as it is like, oh yeah, like she's talking to the media, whatever, like I think that these kinds of moments in the development of these new leagues are so crucial that like the quotes are more important than you might immediately think. But what she said was, "This is a watershed moment for women's sports and especially for softball. MLB's investment will supercharge our efforts to build the sustainable professional league the sport has long deserved and sends a powerful message about the value of female athletes and the importance of creating professional opportunities for them. Together, we're going to reach new fans and inspire the next generation of softball players." I just I love her. Like I want to be like 8 years old and have her like be my coach. I don't know. It's not like insane. I just I look up to her so much. I think she's so awesome. Another really interesting thing that they're doing kind of on the same vein of the MLB partnership is that Home Run Derby X, which is a team-based derby it's not the Home Run Derby. Like it feels like futuristic. Like I don't know why they're calling it Home Run Derby X. Like it feels like it's another like iPhone model or something. It's weird. I don't like that. And like it wasn't immediately obvious online that it was like different just because like it's one letter different. But basically they're 30-minute games with 3 players on each team, and then they're like shortened at bats, and you get points for hitting home runs, like offensive points for hitting home runs, and then defensive points for making catches, and then like most points wins. It's like weird. It kind of feels like a video game to me. Like it's just like very, very strange. You can get bonus points if you hit like a certain target with the ball. And then in the final minute of an at-bat, you can like tag in someone on your team to finish with a flourish, which is literally what the MLB like guidelines for the Derby say, which I thought was hysterical. But it's designed to basically be a derby like with both male and female athletes, which I think is really awesome. It is weird though if you go on like the MLB site, the like bracket that they have. I don't know if it's like old or something, but it shows like just MLB teams. But then on like the AUSL website, there's like better information pertaining to like how like what athletes unlimited players are going to be like in the derby and things like that. So there are going to be 6 AUSL players competing in Home Run Derby X. So it's going to be Hannah Flippin, who plays for the Talons, and that I'm so sorry if I mess up any of these names because I have not ever heard them pronounced. But I'm going to do my best, and as soon as I hear them, I actually should just like go through and start like listening to press conferences and listening to names before the games. Anyway, beside the point. But so Hannah Flippin for the Talons, and then Sydney Romero also from the Talons. And then you have 3 players, Chiara Jennings, Amanda Lorenz, and Erica Castelli, all from the Volts. And then a Volts reserve signing in Allie Newland. So really only from 2 teams, but I'm like not really sure how they went about selecting that, but any participation in that is really exciting. Any increased visibility for the league is really exciting. I am like kind of confused as to how it's gonna like what it'll actually look like when they're playing. But I guess like that'll happen. I don't know. It's over like multiple times, like a long period of time. And so they'll have the first games in July, but then the final won't be until September 19th, 20th, and that'll be out in Salt Lake City. But yeah, that'll be. I'm like excited because like any like new, especially like inclusions or like partnerships between like men's and women's professional sports are like exciting. But like I'm really just like curious as to like what this is gonna look like when they actually do it. But anyway, that's kind of all of the softball news that I have. But really quick, just before we wrap up here, some WNBA stuff. Paige Beckers is out on concussion protocol right now. So that's retroactive to Thursday's game where the Wings were visiting the Sky in Chicago. And I was actually at that game. And I remember this happening. And I remember like basically she may have suffered contact with Courtney Vandersloot, and she grabbed an offensive rebound and like went to drive to the basket with Courtney Vandersloot guarding her, and like I guess they hit heads or something. I don't know. Like I was there and I didn't immediately see like the contact or like what happened between the two of them, but I remember Paige like being on the ground and like holding her head for like longer than like you would if you just like fell down. Like when you watch sports and like you can tell someone's like down for more than they should be, and you're like, oh, that doesn't look good. But like she wasn't down long enough that I was like concerned. I more just like noticed it because I was like, oh, that's Paige. That's not ideal that she's on the ground. But the team said they'd reevaluate after Tuesday's game, and I haven't found anything from the team since, but the league injury report on ESPN has her estimated return date as June 6th. So that's today. Not sure what it looks like today since I'm speaking in the future. But it's not ideal for the Wings. They're struggling. They're 1-7 as of Wednesday, and Paige is averaging 14.7 points, 6.7 assists, and 4.7 rebounds in her first 6 games in the league. So having her out for at least those 2 games is definitely not something that the Wings want. But just like in terms of that like Thursday game overall, the Sky won 97-92, and it just like watching them find their footing and get their first one of the season was so fun. And it was my first WNBA game like in person, and even though I was like there for school, so I was like at like a press table and stuff, I wasn't actually having like a full fan experience. It was like literally one of the most fun sporting events I've ever been to in my life. Like they brought out like horns and like a little band onto the court during the Sky starters, or like when they like ran out. I can't remember which one. I like tweeted about it, but they like started playing Sticky, which is like, first of all, that's how that song needs to be played, is on the horns. But it was like just such a fun, high energy, like you would never have walked into that stadium knowing that team hadn't won a game yet this season. And it was just so fun to see. And I like walked out and I was like, so I need to come back every time they have a game because that was so fun. It was also really cool because that was Courtney Vandersloot's game where she became the Sky's all-time leading scorer. So now she's at 3,733 career points. As of Wednesday, she added 15 in between the Thursday game and today, or the day I'm recording. But it was really fun to see that and to talk to her in like the post-game press conference after, especially because the leading scorer before that was her wife, Allie Quigley. And so it was sweet to hear her kind of talk about what they talked about in relation to the record. And she had said it was kind of a situation where Allie was like, you know, if it's going to be anyone, I would really want it to be you. And she joked that Allie had kind of had her time and now it was Sloot's turn. So that was like fun to kind of have that like special insight into the night. She also did say like it would not have been as fun to break that record if they hadn't won the game, which could not be more true. So I thought that was really funny. And then Camila Cardoso also had an excellent game. She was the other player that came and did post-game media, but she had a career high 23 points and she had the first 10 points for the Sky. And it got, I want to say, like maybe 3 or 4 minutes where like the only points they had were just from Camila. And I remember noticing it right away and like writing it down, and she just continued to have such a great game. She got into a little bit of foul trouble early. I think she ended with 3, but she got her third foul pretty early into, I want to say, the third quarter. And she hit 2 like very fast into the first half. And so I was like a little bit worried that she was going to get herself into trouble that she couldn't get out of, but luckily she didn't. She's been really, really great this season, especially compared to last season. Last season she was averaging just 9.8 points per game, but in the last couple games for the Sky, she's put up 12, 16, and 23 points. So it's been really great to like watch her find her footing. And she's also just like a ray of sunshine. Like she came into the press room and was just absolutely glowing, and like it just was such a nice, like obviously like athletes post game, like they're gonna feel however they're gonna feel, and they're absolutely entitled to that. But like she just seemed happy to see us, and it was just really sweet. In terms of what is going on this weekend around the league, we have not too many games, but the Commissioner's Cup is continuing. So today, Friday, we have 2 games. The Atlanta Dream play the Connecticut Sun in Connecticut at 6:30 Central tonight. And then the LA Sparks play the Wings in Dallas at 8:30. On Saturday, you have the Las Vegas Aces at Golden State Valkyries at 2 Central, Indiana Fever at Chicago Sky at 7 Central. And that's the game where all the ticket prices are dropping because Caitlin Clark is out, and people in the city, like I know a lot of people that were going to this game and now they're like mad because Caitlin isn't going to be there. Anyway, last game on Saturday will be at 9 Central. That'll be Seattle Storm at Mercury. And then on Sunday, June 9th, the Connecticut Sun will play the Washington Mystics at 2 Central, followed by the Minnesota Lynx at Dallas Wings at 3 Central. Another like weird thing that popped up actually when I was on the playback like break, I paused recording. Yahoo Sports reported breaking news that there's currently an investigation being launched into the Seattle Storm coaching staff by the WNBA and league security. They're reviewing a complaint from a former Storm player who alleges an assistant coach directed profanity at them. That's simply all the information that I have right now, but I am very interested to see kind of how that develops and what, if anything, happens with that. But yeah, kind of a weird note to end on, but when things like pop up when I'm kind of in the middle or taking a brief pause from recording, I try to mention them, especially if they're as relevant as the things today were. But that is all I have for you. Thanks for sticking with me if you're here till the end. I know it was a little bit of a longer episode. As always, don't forget to follow the show on socials at Sarah Says So ETB on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, as well as all podcast platforms. And I will talk to you next week with, I'm sure, so much PWHL news, but I will try not to bog down the entire episode with it this time, since most decisions will be pretty solidified by then, hopefully. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk next week.